Hey guys, this is Dr. L, and we're going to talk about biological toxins as agents of harm in this lesson. We're going to define biological toxins and talk about how they're different from but related to what are called biological agents. Consider some of the sources of biological toxins. Learn a little bit about two examples, ricin and botulinum toxin, and briefly along the way talk about what is called the select agents list. So right away, I want to make a point. I'm going to repeat myself on this too. Like, what is a biological agent? So a biological agent is something that is alive. Okay, so it is living. Typically or often we're talking about microbes when we're talking about biological agents, but snakes could be biological agents, or humans, or etc., etc. Okay, so biological agents that are microbial will usually cause infection and disease, right? And this is different from chemical agents, which are not living. And so we're going to consider the toxins that are produced by the living agent as a chemical agent, but we're going to consider, kind of overlapping between the category of biological agents and chemical agents, okay? I'll talk more about that along the way, so hopefully that will be clarified. This is a common area of misperception. So we're going to focus now on biological toxins. That's the goal of this lesson. Biological toxins are toxic chemicals, usually these are proteins, produced by biological organisms. So they could be bacterial toxins. So for example, if you get tetanus disease, you've been infected with the organism Clostridium tetani, and then that organism is secreting a protein toxin called tetanus toxin. And it's the toxin that is making you extremely ill, okay? It's not the organism itself. The organism itself matters because it's the source of the toxin, but it is the toxin that is making you sick. So this is really a poisoning event, okay? Animals can produce toxins. So snake venom is a great example of a venom or a toxin, biological toxin produced by living things. Insects produce toxins. So scorpions produce toxins. Bees and other stinging insects like ants will produce toxins. Plants produce toxins, and we'll talk about an example of that called ricin in a moment. And fungi can produce toxins. In fact, fungi produce literally tens of thousands of different toxic compounds, many different toxic compounds. For example, a toxin called, let's go back there. A toxin called, a really explicit name, vomitoxin, and you can imagine what the symptoms are based on the name, is produced by the fungus called Fusarium graminearum, which is the subject of a discussion post and was in the news this week as people tried to illegally bring that or smuggle that particular fungus into the US last July. And that agent is responsible for a very dangerous plant disease that is a serious threat to our food system. So those toxins produced by fungi are generically referred to as mycotoxins. So the key here is all these agents are biological and they're producing something that is toxic. They're producing a poison and we're calling that a biological toxin. So why would, the theme in this module is warfare and terrorism. So it's all about, bad guys, bad actors, right? So why would bad actors want to use these agents? So what might make them potentially good for warfare or terrorism, for harming others on purpose? They are highly potent, so it typically takes a very little bit to cause a lot of harm, specifically death or incapacitation. They are perceived as naturally available and therefore potentially easy to secure, maybe cheap, right? And they are perceived as being something that is particularly frightening or can cause high fear in a population. They can also be difficult to detect because you really only have to use small concentrations, and it's hard to detect small amounts of anything. The world has agreed not to use biological weapons, which includes both biological agents, the living creatures themselves, and also the toxins that they produce. So back in 1972, there was something called the Biological Weapons Convention, And it's shown in here. Biological agents are shown in blue. And so this bar here is showing you the time frame. This was just at the beginning, or just during the Vietnam War. The world got together and people committed to this convention to prohibit the development, the production, and the stockpiling of any sorts of bacteriological or other biological weapons, and agreed to destroy them. So that was really a landmark treaty, and we don't know that everybody has honored it, but at the states level, right, at the formal level of countries, people should be honoring it. The source of this slide is in the slide notes, but this shows also like other treaties around weapons that could potentially be used as weapons of mass destruction. Let's look at a couple specific examples. So we're going to look at ricin, and we're going to look at botulinum toxin. Ricin is an example of a plant toxin. It comes from the seeds of the castor bean plant. The Latin name for that is Ricinus communis, and the plant is shown over here on the right, top right. It's actually a very beautiful plant. It produces these lovely flowers and lovely thick, dense seed coats with brilliant colors. And this is an economically very important plant. It is grown and the seeds are harvested in order to extract castor oil. So it's not a true bean, despite the word bean in the plant name. It's a source of these seeds, and these are a source of castor oil. And castor oil is used for many different purposes globally. And so this crop is grown a lot in India and Brazil, but it can grow in a lot of other places. It's a very hardy crop. Now, this is a pretty scary toxin, ricin. So ricin, like if you ate 4 of those seeds, you would probably be dead. Just a little bit more on the castor oil production. So castor oil is produced through an extraction and purification process, and along the way, in order to get to the oil, there's a heating stage. Okay, so in order to make castor oil, the seeds and the seed extracts are heated, and the heating inactivates ricin. So it is heat labile, meaning it is knocked out or inactivated or degraded by heat. And I think that's important to note. So like we don't have ricin in castor oil anymore. It's being removed. Ricin is a toxic protein. It's a glycoprotein, which means protein plus sugar bonded together. There are 2 subunits or protein clusters, A and B, held together by what is called a disulfide bond. And so this is a model of the structure of the ricin glycoprotein when it is intact. The little sugar groups are shown here in like red and black, and then the little gray-blue area is different than the greenish area, and one of these is A and one of these is B, and I actually forget which is which. Okay, and this gets, the mode of action will involve these 2 subunits separating, and it's the A part that actually does the damage. But for now, for our purposes, we'll just remember this is a toxic protein produced by the castor bean plant. So the way that ricin harms is that when a person or any creature takes ricin in, it will inhibit or prevent that creature from making protein. So it will inhibit protein synthesis. It does that by inhibiting or blocking the action of what is called the ribosome. Ribosomes are the cell components that make proteins, and living things cannot live without proteins. So if you stop the ability to make protein, then you will effectively kill the cell, and if you kill enough cells, you'll kill the human. Okay, so these are supposed to be ribosomes here and here. And for those of you that know a little bit more about ribosomes, the ricin will act at the level of ribosomal RNA, which is found in the large subunit of the ribosome, and it will affect it in such a way as to prevent the ribosome from traveling down messenger RNA molecules, which it needs to do in steps called translocations in order to produce proteins. Okay, if your background's not so much Biology, and you don't know so much about ribosomes, it's enough to remember that ricin will block protein synthesis by harming ribosomes. Very, very toxic protein. Okay, so there was a study, and there's a link to the study in the slide notes, done not too long ago, looking at accidental ricin poisoning. So this isn't actually really common. Like, we don't see a lot of accidental ricin poisoning. So since 1980, there were about 55 globally reported poisons, and the number of deaths reported or attributed to ricin poisoning accidentally was 6. Since from 1980 to 2020, I think, is when they cut off their study. I'm showing you this slide just to mention that you do have some accidental poisonings and to talk about the symptoms. When people are poisoned with ricin, typically they've eaten it, like they've eaten a castor bean by mistake, or some sort of lapse in judgment, and they'll show gastrointestinal symptoms immediately, including severe vomiting. And it's, by immediate, I mean like a few hours later, about 5 hours later. And what will happen is the ricin will act very quickly at that point. So like once you see the vomiting, then you'll have multiple organ failure, and death within the next day or two. There's no antidote, there's no vaccine. It's very difficult to treat. This is a really deadly poison. So mostly you just do sort of supportive care, like rehydrate. So there is some history with bad actors hurting people on purpose with ricin, and typically this is used like very small scale, very targeted. So this is a poison that has been used successfully to specifically assassinate or attempt to assassinate like one specific target. So famously back in 1978, Georgy Markov was assassinated in London, and it is thought that that was a combined effort by the Bulgarian Secret Service and the Soviet Union KGB at that time. He was assassinated in London in 1981. Boris Korczak there was an attempted assassination in Virginia. He was a CIA double agent. They think the KGB was involved in that, but it was never proved. Nobody was ever prosecuted in anywhere that I have a question mark here. People have tried putting this in the mail. So in 2003, ricin was detected in White House mail facilities during President Bush's tenure there. There were no injuries. There is allegedly no idea. Nobody was ever charged or prosecuted there. And in 2013, Barack Obama also was sent ricin lace letters by, in that case, somebody was arrested and convicted, Everett Duchke from Mississippi. This appeared to be some kind of like a crazy personal vendetta. And I have read that ricin was detected in letters sent to President Trump in, I think, 2016, but I'm not positive about that. So people, it's out there, right? And people are trying to use it in order to harm others. It is what is called a select agent. So the link to this Code of Federal Regulation, or CFR, is in the slide notes, which I will post for you. And there is a list of select biological agents, so both the bioorganisms, the living things, and in some cases the toxins. Ricin is a toxin, and it's number 17 on this list, so it's down below. I wanted you to see the information on the CFR and the numbers on that. So this is a list kept by the United States Department of Health and Human Services. It's their select agents and toxins list. There are 36 items on that list at this point in time. It was just amended in June, I believe. And so ricin does make that list. It's highly toxic. So data from mice show that if you get it orally, if a mouse gets it orally, it only takes 29 milligrams per kilogram to be the LD50. Intraperitoneal, which is like in the peritoneal cavity, down to 0.023 milligrams per kilogram, IV 0.0075. So we're in a microgram per kilogram amounts. And for humans, the LD50 is estimated to be between 1 and 10. All right, I'm going to toggle over to another slideshow.